So I was advised by a friend to check out this movie last night. It is from the 90s. It's called A Midnight Clear. It is actually from the 80s because the book is from the 80s. The movie was released 10 years later and adapted for the screen and everything. It's a whole thing. Anyway, this film didn't really get much anywhere. It doesn't seem like it had much media coverage, if at all. It didn't look like there were many studios involved with it, to be honest, because there was only like 5 or 10 seconds at the beginning of the film, so I don't think there was much of a budget. It definitely flew under the radar. There's only maybe one actor that I recognized or like was a big name. Um, I want to say Mother looked almost exactly like Lieutenant Dan. I don't know if that's the same guy, Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. I don't know if that's the same guy. They just gave him a pair of glasses and called it a day or what. Anyway, from the opening first minute of this film, I thought it was going to go a completely different direction. The way it was advertised to me, he said it was just completely fucked up, and I didn't really have any idea what I was expecting. But whenever Mother just screams and strips and runs into the forest, truthfully, I didn't know what I was expecting. I definitely wasn't expecting a psychological break in the first 30 seconds of the film, especially with no like previous attachment to the characters, no lore, no backstory, no anything. It was just right there from the get-go. To make a long story short, we are given a good bit of exposition as the film progresses. We follow an intelligence squad that is supposed to have 12 people, but 6 of them died. So there's a little bit of discussion as to whether or not more intelligence it really is worth anything if they just die the same as anybody else. There's also a bit of humor and wit because the majority of them are virgins whenever they enlisted, and they wonder if there's some correlation between having intelligence and not getting laid, which I can personally attest to. The few times I acted like a fucking idiot is usually when I got laid, or like a perpetual dumbass that sort of increased my chances. So if I maybe it's just me, but anyway, I feel like I can lend some credence to that theory. Anyways, we start off in the Ardennes forest, and we go from there. There's this little army camp station there. We get introduced to a few more characters, Major Griffin, or the name I just came up with 10 seconds ago, Major Shitfit. His trusty lieutenant, which is a little bit more easy on the guys, the enlisted guys, that is, which we will see later on. And, well, I mean, to be honest, that's kind of it. You just have the squad, the intelligence squad, Griffin, and the lieutenant. I don't even know his name. Anyway, the entire point, this doesn't focus on the squad, is that the lieutenant is actually the ear to Griffin. So Griffin says, oh, well, the Germans may be advancing into this corridor. I sent a patrol out a few days ago. No word back. Actually, they haven't even come back at all. So I need you guys to go to this house up in that sector and check it out and see, like, lay low, see what's happening. Do some recon. And the lieutenant is the ear to Griffin. They're to maintain constant radio contact with him, to let him know of any potential goings on, whatever's happening in the area. Oh yes, I think his name was Ware and Griffin. Anyway, to tell you about the few squad characters I do remember, there's Mother and Father. Mother definitely just like is unstable throughout the film. He could have been a lot worse. I thought that really was what it was leading towards, but it really wasn't. He just like had a moment, I guess, which makes sense. It does happen. Shell shock, PTSD, that sort of shit happens all the time. Father is well, he's called Father because he's a priest. He admonishes the group for swearing, so they try not to swear, which is funny. Mother is called Mother because he dotes on everybody. Anyways, as they take their 2 jeeps and supplies and everything to this house, they come upon 2 bodies that are intertwined with each other, an American and a German. There's a few more of these signs. The first couple nights, they hear they hear Germans talking to each other. They translate some phrases that are said. They eventually even have a snowball fight with them for some reason. Anyway, it all ends up coming down to a meeting between them, the both of them. and they ask for their leader and officer. But the bit of diplomacy where they're supposed to be, spying on the enemy and like, killing them and shit, it reminds me of World War One, the Christmas of World War One, where both armies didn't want to fight each other. They had they had Christmas Day to themselves, so they played soccer and like, traded food and like and they had fun, right? And they didn't want to fight each other, and so after that, they got separated and the war started up again. But if you are familiar with that story, which I guess you are because I just told it to you, if you're familiar with it, then this movie is basically like that, except it goes kind of all right at the end. Um, but we'll get into that in a bit. So the guys try to find their most Aryan-looking guy, the tallest blonde guy there. They're like, "Hey, we're gonna take all of our stripes, we're gonna sew them onto a jacket, and we're gonna say you're an officer." But to me, this kind of like falls through. I guess they're playing on the ignorance of the Germans, not knowing that 8 stripes on a jacket looks terrible and not anyway genuine at all. You would think they would have known that an officer, like how lieutenants are called butter bars, and officers have stars, and so do majors and generals. They don't. None of them have any stripes, is what I'm saying. Now, senior enlisted have stripes. So if you want to talk about like an E7, E89, throw a gunny or a master sergeant in there, take off a couple of them stripes, you could say that'd be pretty cool, right? But like, I'm just it's fucking with me, okay? That's why I wanted to mention it. So they have their little meeting with the guy disguised as an officer. They say, the Germans say, "Oh well, we want to surrender. Shit's not doing great. We want to, actually live." To these 3 guys, the other 3 are back at the house because, well, some of them didn't really trust the plan, didn't really believe in it. Mother was one of them, which um, this comes into play later. Mother ends up fucking up their little plan because he wasn't privy to some of the details. He also didn't believe in it, so that helps too. Anyway, the Germans say, "We want to surrender, but we can't just surrender, okay? Because if we surrender, the German leadership are going to say, okay, well, you guys didn't even fucking try. We're going to kill your entire families." So they say, "We need to fake it. We need to make it look like we realistically tried to surrender, or not tried to surrender, tried to put up a fight, then had to, or we would have been killed." So they do this. They radio back to HQ. They say, "Hey guys, we might have an opportunity to take a couple prisoners." And they say, "Oh, well, Ware says, well, me and Griffin can come down and help you out with that." And they say, "No, no, 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 no. We'll take care of it. We'll do it. And we'll bring them to you, and it'll be so much easier." So they stall them for now, and they head to the meeting, into which they don't still fully trust them, but they hesitatingly go into the exchange. They go into that firing position where that soldiers do at funerals. Like they have the firing line, and they fire up into the air, and all is going well actually, until Mother comes along and starts shooting a couple of them. He doesn't know anything about it, right? So he actually does it for real. So the Germans are like, "What the fuck, guys? You're actually killing us." So then they fight, and the Americans lose a couple, and the Germans lose all of them except for one, which they do actually end up taking prisoner, but the prisoner dies on the way back, so everybody dies, basically. And you'd think it's one of those heartwarming films where everybody gets out. They actually have the exchange and everything, but no. No, that little scene, they all die. Mother eventually confesses a few minutes later that, well, Ware and Griffin actually came down to the house ahead of time, spooking him, so he kind of had to do something, and he ends up running up, and so if they didn't come to the house ahead of time, they could have potentially had all the prisoners, kept them alive, etc. Aside from taking the wounded and going back to HQ, the rest of the squad stays at the house and is told to keep an eye on the impending enemy attack that the Germans warned them about. Since they're meant to keep constant radio contact, Well, they try to do so, except they find out that Griffin just pulled out totally without telling anybody, and fell back a little. I guess he felt a little bit too close. Anyway, Ware eventually says later on that he tried to warn them, but Griffin said there wasn't time to, which I guess he is. Well, he doesn't put up a fight about it, so I guess it's not really a huge deal. It's not necessarily a real action heavy movie. It's just more about people and personalities and how we interact with each other. You know, if you end up talking to the other side for more than 5 seconds between shooting rounds at each other, you might actually realize they are people too. It's insane. It's a fucking insane concept, I know, believe me. But it's one of those movies. It's not really a war movie. Like it is, but it's more on the human side, which is important to have too. They can't all just be shoot 'em ups. This movie tries to do something different, and potentially because of that, it goes into the gutter. There again, like I said, there's no coverage on this. There's actually the entire movie on YouTube, which kind of tells me that I don't have to rely on B-roll to make this video itself, this review. I can hopefully just throw a few clips in here of relevant scenes and characters, interactions, and do that instead of relying on other less related material. Because if the movie itself wasn't taken down, then it really did fly under the radar because it doesn't even have copyright attached to it. You know what I mean? I mean, who's to say it will in the future? But I mean, it's already been 30 years, so I kind of doubt it. Anyway, it's sitting at a modest 80,000 views right now, so if you want to check it out, it is really cool. I liked it. It felt a bit long, but it was still good. The warmonger in me wished for a little bit more action out of it, but I do like the morality side of movies. I'm not going to say I like soap operas and like, you know, crying about feelings and shit, but it is nice to have something every once in a while that isn't the ordinary. You know what I mean? It tries to do something different. Whether or not it succeeds is a different story, but if it tries in the first place, that's commendable effort. To go back to the film, before they try to raise the guys on the radio, the attack does go on. This is where they try to do that. They try to get them on the radio. No, nothing's happening. Nobody is responding. So they say, okay, we'll retreat, we'll run. They end up losing a Jeep in the process. The other Jeep runs out of gas. But by this point, they found out that the camp is gone. So they end up driving around in circles, and they end up hatching a plan. They make themselves look like medics, and they actually see some real action for the first time in the movie, but this is like 10 minutes before the ending, so it's nothing huge. But no, they don't actually see any action. They see an SS convoy that they actually successfully managed to evade, but nothing actually really happened. You would think they would have become POWs themselves at this point, but no, they don't. They evade them, they take up the corpse of their comrade, and there's 4 of them left. So they end up walking in a certain direction, and then they get reunited with the Americans again, thankfully. So all in all, I mean, I really did like it. I like how that one scene that's where everything hinged on, like everything relied on that exchange to go well. And hey, you know what? Sometimes 90% of the time, that sort of thing, that trade, that interaction will go well, okay? But it's the 10%, that 5%, that 1% of times you never hear about. And well, guess what? I don't know if that's what they wanted to go for here, but that's my take. Sometimes shit doesn't go right. There were a few cutaways in the movie I wasn't much a fan of. I do like how they tried to give us more lore, and this is specifically referring to the time that 4 of the guys got a woman for the night, and they're like, okay, we're gonna get laid tonight, guys. And it was a good like 10 minutes. It was a segue after the whole intelligence correlating to virginity part. But anyway, that part kind of didn't really fit in my opinion, but I can understand why. Some studios some publishers, they're like, okay, we can't just have it be all about this. Sometimes we need to have there be a B-roll part. You know what I mean? So it can't just be all of A. There needs to be a little bit of B too. For example, the first Silent Hill movie, um, the publisher, they were like, okay, man, we can't just film this in the town itself. There needs to be other shit so that we can pad the length or whatever, make it more interesting. So that's where Sean Bean's character comes in. The guy who plays Boromir in Lord of the Rings, that's where his character comes in. He investigates the town and everything. It's a little boring. I will be honest, because it's not action y, but it does show you the outside and like the world and everything, so it's understandable. And they do that same thing here, right? They do the world building. They give you a little bit more lore about the characters. They try to make you care about them a little bit more, have a little bit more investment. But to wrap things up, apparently IMDb has given it a 7. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a little bit of a higher score with an 88%. I mean, I feel like I agree with IMDb's score a little bit more, but there's nothing really wrong with it. The budget actually was $5 million for this movie, that's higher than I expected. At the end of the day, it might be a film that does it for you, and it might not be. And there's movies like that for everyone.